Michael Plaut talks about finding private teachers, the New Horizon Band, and starting a jug and bottle band. Enjoy this fascinating conversation.
Welcome to the podium, Mike. Appreciate you coming in.
Good to be here, Mark. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Let's get right into it. Before we get into the New Horizon International Music Association information, I'd like to hear about that. You wrote an article in a publication called The Clarinet Enthusiast. And in that article, you talk about your beginning of playing the clarinet and how you started. Can you tell our listeners about that?
Sure. We had a very musical family. All four kids played an instrument of one kind or another. In fact, I once had my younger sister crying one time because we had a clarinet, an oboe, and a flute, and we told her that she would have to play the bassoon, and she was very short at the time. But I started in the fifth grade, used borrowed school instruments, and my dad actually recommended starting on the clarinet because he knew that I could easily convert to another woodwind instrument from the clarinet if I wanted to do that. And I did, in fact, in seventh grade, convert to oboe because they needed oboists in the band. So from seventh until 12th grade, I played the oboe.
How did you like that?
It was fine, except that when I went back to the clarinet, 48 years later, I knew that the clarinet was more versatile in terms of the kinds of music it could play. And also my niece, when she went to medical school at the University of New Mexico, by the way, gave me her student clarinet because she wasn't playing anymore. So that's what I started with. I had that refurbished, started taking lessons. This was a year before my retirement, and then eventually I got a professional level clarinet as a retirement gift from my wife.
How do you like that? That's similar to mine. After I retired, my wife said, "Go buy your saxophone if you're going to continue playing," and we did that. Yeah, that's great. Now, after high school and you went into college, did you continue playing, Mike?
No, I didn't. I just had borrowed instruments. I never owned an instrument. We never rented any. I never took private lessons. So it just went all by the wayside. But my interest in music continued in terms of attending concerts. And then I did some other interesting things too, like I used to form jug and bottle bands in places where I worked. And that was a lot of fun.
I wanted to get into that. You talk about in your article. Where did that come from?
It came from a skit I was in seventh grade. We did a skits about being in different cultures, and one of them was a bunch of hillbillies making moonshine, and the hillbillies had a jug band. So some of us got together with the assistance of our music teacher, and we all had jugs and bottles assigned to us, tuned them up, and then we had a melody instrument. I don't remember what it was at that time, but we played Little Brown Jug or things like that, and we actually had commercial music for that, which I bought. And once I started working, I would just for fun form jug bands in places where I worked, and I might have a bunch of, because I was working in a medical environment as a psychologist, so I might have a bunch of surgical techs or psychiatrists or pediatricians, and we would give ourselves a name that fit the group, like the super egos or the respirators, and we would, and people didn't have to know how to read music because everybody had only 2 or 3 bottles or jugs. So we were able to put this together and have a lot of fun, and we would play for Christmas parties and things like that. And I really enjoyed that.
That's great. I love that. I love that story. That's great. So tell us about your next step. How long were you in the medical field, you mentioned, correct?
Yeah, finished grad school in '68 and was doing different academic jobs until 2008, which is when I retired. And it was a year before that when I started playing the clarinet again. And I knew having a teacher would be a good idea. So I've had private teachers ever since that time.
Mhm.
And that's been
And-
really helpful because it encourages me to practice,
right.
and it also helps me improve my technique.
And I hear a common thread through these talks we have on the podcast that I call it life gets in the way, and people navigate away from their music and the instrument, but then you come back. This may be a little bit inappropriate, but I always think of it like it's the mafia. It brings you back in again. The music brings you back again. And so what brought you back into, like you said, your wife got you your clarinet, but you had to take that step to get those private teachers. What made you get motivated again to do that?
Well, I knew when I started that having a private teacher would help me move along
Mhm.
because I was just starting with a self-instruction book. And, first I had a saxophone teacher at a local music shop, and then he told me I really needed a real clarinetist. And I approached one of the clarinetists in the Baltimore Symphony,
Mm.
who said as long as I was serious, he would work with me, and he did. And I worked with him for a year. This was still in Baltimore, where I spent most of my career. But then when I left to move to North Carolina for a while, his last advice to me was find a group to play with.
Right.
And he knew that would be good for me, and that's how I ended up getting into New Horizons from that.
I see. Yeah. And that's
And
nice.
I didn't know about New Horizons. We were in Wilmington, North Carolina, and my wife and I were attending our first concert of the Wilmington Symphony Orchestra and chatting with the usher before the doors opened. And I said, I'm looking for a group to play with. And she said, where are you sitting? I told her. During intermission, a woman came over and said she was the oboist with the New Horizons band at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington.
How do you like
And
that?
that's how it all began.
And I find that here in New Mexico and Albuquerque, similar kind of word of mouth kind of connection is a lot of how that happens.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's get into that. And you talked about also in your article about I want to go back to the private teachers real quick. That instruction that you sought out, having that private instruction, even at your senior years, is so valuable, don't you think?
Absolutely. And it's nice that you can find teachers who are willing to work with older people.
Yes. Yes.
Because one joke we have about that is that at least they don't have to worry about parents.
We won't go down that road.
But I was lucky because we knew we were going to move to Gainesville, Florida, where the University of Florida is.
Mhm.
And so I got in touch with the clarinet professor, Mitch Estrin, who was a past president of the International Clarinet Association.
Right.
And he has found me excellent teachers ever since I started working with private instructors. And most recently, I've been working with some of his graduate students, and they've been terrific.
Super, super. Talk about your groups that you're in now.
Well, I play in two groups now. One is the Gainesville Community Band, which is not a New Horizons group because the Gainesville Community Band is approaching its 50th year now, and New Horizons is only 31 years old. But the Gainesville Community Band has musicians ranging from college level all the way to the 90s.
Wow.
And they don't do auditions.
Right.
And you just decide for yourself if you can handle the music or not. And we have a conductor Gary Langford, who was a professor at the University of Florida, who was very good about finding that balance between the ability of the musicians in the group and the type of music we play.
Right.
And so I started playing in that group, which is wonderful because it's 60 people. We do 7 concerts a year. And then my wife and I live in a retirement community that is affiliated with the University of Florida called Oak Hammock. And we had a chorus here conducted by university faculty, but there was no instrumental group at all. So I decided to start one.
Right.
And I put out an email to the community and said, this is what we're going to do. And we had about 7 or 8 people show up at first. But we have a program here called the Institute for Learning in Retirement, which includes people from the community. So we have grown at the present time. 2/3 of our group is from the community, not residents here. But we have been playing now for 10 years. Every Thursday afternoon, Gary Langford, the same conductor, is working with us, and he's terrific, very patient with us. And since we have a relatively small group of 15 to 20 people, we use 4-part music, which I had learned about in North Carolina, and it gives us a lot of flexibility.
That's great.
Well, yeah, it's been great, and it's as we hear from so many New Horizons groups, it's not only the music, it's the socialization,
Right.
and the support we give each other in terms of technique, and it's just been a nice group of people to work with.
I want to tap into that a little bit. We have coming up our holiday potluck. We had our last concert, and now we get to party.
Yeah.
And it's at the church where we practice. The socialization is such a big part of it, isn't it?
Absolutely, and in fact, if you've ever seen Roy Ernst's documentary about New Horizons, there's one couple in there who met in their New Horizons band and ended up getting married. And not that that's an objective, but that's how far these relationships can take you.
Right. I want you to talk about also the emotional connection with the music as we get older. Throw in a little bit about of course, the cognitive part of it and what music does for us as we get older. Tell us about your thoughts on that.
Well, one of the things, I've always been a great lover of classical music, especially. And one of the things I've been able to do with my private lessons is to play excerpts from classical pieces that I especially like and that are also challenging.
Right.
I recently played a Finzi's clarinet concerto, which is a challenge, but I love it. And it was an incentive for me to practice, because then all the other stuff you have to do to improve your technique is easier to do when you have that as well.
Yeah.
But I also find that playing music is a wonderful escape, because when I'm playing, I kind of forget the rest of the world and I'm focused on what I'm doing, and I just put myself into it. And my teacher can even tell that I'm doing that,
Right.
because of the way it comes across, and that's a very therapeutic experience.
On some of the other past episodes I've done, it was almost verbatim what you just said. I had a buddy of mine, Jay, who plays percussion, and he said it just takes him away into another place, and that's a great way to think about that. And also, it also helps our memory and exercising that mental muscle that we have.
Oh, absolutely. It helps memory. It helps coordination, tactile coordination. And one of the things I experienced when I started playing again was I couldn't reach one of the pinky keys on the clarinet. Seems like a small thing, but you don't use your pinky for very much most of the time. And a physical therapist friend just had me do rubber band exercises with my hand
Right.
months. And now I'm at the point where I can do that. So there are many physical and mental and social advantages of continuing with music when you're older. And of course, one of the things we've also found living in a place like we do, where people are sometimes suffering from dementia,
Mm-hmm.
is that music can bring them back to earlier memories
Yeah.
and even get them up and dancing again,
Right.
because the memories are so unique and so specific.
Yeah, the memories are vivid in our minds. It will, since I've been retired, I have had these, I don't know if you want to call them flashbacks, but memories basically of various different things as I've gone through my journey. And I think this is a good time to get into an area you talked about in your article about limitations. My son, my youngest son, is in the Navy. Of course, he's young, playing in the Navy band, and we had a conversation about, well, you get older, you can't play as well as you used to, yada yada yada. And he talked about, well, when I get to that point, I'm just going to quit, and there was an adjustment there. Talk about those limitations that we have to maybe even use that bad word compromise on.
Oh, no, compromise is a wonderful word. And I have found that that's been important to me. For example, sometimes I will have trouble reading music as fast as I should, and I will use a pencil and I will make marks.
Mhm.
If a note's on a certain space or line, I will actually write what that is on the music because it helps me get to it faster.
Right.
So I use little techniques like that to help me out. But I also have to realize that there are some things I'm never going to be able to do. I cannot play as fast as I would like to.
Mhm.
And of course, some people in the New Horizons program even change instruments.
Right.
If you have arthritis and you can't play music that requires a lot of manual dexterity, maybe the trombone is a better instrument for you, or percussion or something like that. But there are so many ways to adapt to our limitations if we really want to do it.
And you hit a nail on the head there because, well, first of all, we were just talking about that. A friend of mine, Sarah, she plays oboe, and she had tried trumpet and trombone, and she's now on oboe. And that changing of instruments. In our last concert, we also had some trumpet players when they had a rest to help out with the percussion section.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that change is a very important part because it allows us to still be part of the group,
Absolutely.
to participate.
Sure.
Yeah, it's just one of the reasons why I started this podcast is because I think that it's so important for people that have played in the past, but said, okay, I'll give it up. Understand that you can come back
Mm-hmm.
and pick up the instrument again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about
I was talking to
yeah. Go ahead.
a friend recently whose daughters were playing trombone and clarinet, respectively, twin daughters. And she talked about selling their instruments because they're not playing in the band anymore. And I said, why?
Yeah.
They might come back to it sometime. Because one of the things that I found when we started our group here at Okamek was that people didn't have instruments anymore because they gave them away
That's right.
to kids. And we actually started out with recorders. We had a retired music teacher who worked with us for a while until Gary joined us to conduct. But he wouldn't allow us to play recorders now. But at the beginning, that's what we did because it helped us get back in and building our confidence and playing together.
Right.
And then little by little, people either rented or bought or reacquired instruments that they used to play.
Right.
And So it works.
Yeah, that is a typical progression I have seen over the years. Is that they start in elementary, middle school, whatever, go to high school. The parents sell the instrument. They go off, like I said, life starts,
Yes.
and then grandma has your horn from blah blah blah. Let's give it to the grandchild. The
Uh-huh.
grandchild quits. They sell it at a yard sale, and then we get, in our 50s, 60s, and it's like, you know what? Whatever happened to that instrument, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, we need to have somebody to listen to us play. And I really think the unsung hero in this whole scheme of music, I mean, you can go all the way to the professionals, to wherever you want to go. We have to have the listener. We have to have the listener, the audience. And tell us your thoughts about how you and we all connect with the audience with music at a concert or, a recital. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are different ways we do that. First of all, there are people in audiences who just like music and they will enjoy coming to a concert. Um, but when you're in a group like New Horizons, people don't think of grandma and grandpa playing music, especially with a group, and it's kind of a sense of pride. The grandma and grandpa have gone to kids' concerts and performances when they were in school, and now it just turns everything around,
Right.
and it becomes a good family time for
Right.
people. Now here at Oakhammock, where we live, there aren't a lot of immediate family around, but people come, and the hall is always full when we do a concert.
Right.
And people appreciate the fact that we do this, and they talk about it.
Right.
So it's a good feeling to know that they really appreciate what we do and all the work we put into it.
Absolutely. And I had that feeling this past weekend when we did our concert, and people all come up afterwards, and it's a group thing where the audience is saying, hey, thank you for playing, but we're also saying thank you for coming and listening. It's a family affair kind of thing.
Yeah, and of course we also try to play music that is meaningful to the audience. I mean, we do a lot of education too, like orchestras typically do, but somebody may have died recently, for example, and we will play something like Largo from the New World Symphony or Nimrod from Enigma Variations as a tribute to that person.
Sure.
And that's very much appreciated as well.
Yes, it's funny you bring that up. It's we lost a staple here in our community, Nick Lucchetti, a percussionist, and so we dedicated our first number to him this past performance. Let me take you to the New Horizon International Music Association. You're the president. Tell us about that a little bit, will you?
Well, as probably most of your listeners know, New Horizons was started originally by Roy Ernst, who was an music education professor at the Eastman School of Music, and there are now over 200 New Horizons groups, choruses, orchestras, bands, chamber groups in a number of countries. So the New Horizons International Music Association has been a way of coordinating those groups. Now, most of them operate on their own.
Sure.
And they may not even care if the central group exists or not. But we can do a lot in terms of coordinating. We have online sessions now where music directors from different groups can get together and compare notes. COVID, interestingly enough, has been a real stimulus for the things like that. In fact, we have been doing virtual teaching sessions. It's been traditional to have camps in New Horizons where people can go to one place. We had two this past year, which had been canceled during COVID. So people can actually get together and meet other people and play in different kinds of ensembles at these camps. But in the last couple of years, we've had virtual groups too, where people actually teach courses online at a very low rate of money.
Hmm.
In fact, if you're a member, they're free usually.
Hmm.
So that helps bring people together. And some of them have been really moving and instructive. For example, we had one professor from the Midwest talk about disability in music.
Right.
He's a person who had a stroke and he lost the use of half of his body,
Sure.
and he had a saxophone made for him
Wow.
that he can play with one hand.
Oh, man.
And what an inspiration that is to people who, as we said before, lose their ability to play in the way that they were used to doing. So I think the central group has provided a number of ways for people in the New Horizons community to communicate with each other and get together.
Absolutely. Well, it's a wonderful thing. It's a win-win situation for the listeners, the audience, the players, the communities. And we all know that music is just the gift that keeps on giving, and we love it so much. I want to thank you so much for taking the time, Mike, and supporting the effort nationally over in your community, and coming in and sharing it with us today. So thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. It's been fun to do this with you.
Absolutely. And I hope to get some of the other members in your organization over there. Please talk it up to come in and share their journey. I really
Sure.
am inspired to hear other people and how, and it's kind of interesting, Mike, how it all runs parallel. You're on the other side of the country, but we're all going, we started in elementary, we did this, we did that, but we've come back to the music,
Mm-hmm.
and it's great. So anyway, I won't keep you. Thanks so much for coming by. And we want to thank the listeners that are listening to the podcast. Again, these podcasts will come out once or twice a month. And we hope you'll find the Podium at your favorite podcast platform. Mike, again, thank you so much. And happy holidays to you and your family.
Thank you.
At the time of this recording. And everyone else listening, take care, be safe. And always, let's try to play the right notes.
And listening to the Podium. If you would like to be a guest on the Podium, email the show at onthepodium2@gmail.com. That's ONTHEPODIUM TOO @gmail.com.